Hey guys, Dr. Bodle here, and thanks for joining me again today as we discuss the differences between Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. Now, this can be a tricky one because these terms are often used together, sometimes they're used interchangeably, and even though they mean similar things, they don't mean the same things. To start off, we can think about hypothyroidism more like a category or an overarching term. It's defined by low thyroid symptoms in combination with an elevated TSH and low T4 levels. But the reason why I think of it more as an overarching term is because it's only a description of what's going on. It doesn't tell us why our thyroid isn't functioning properly. So to me, hypothyroidism would be like asking someone what kind of pet they have. They might respond that they have a dog, which is helpful, but you really want to know what kind of dog they have because that's going to help you to know how much that dog should be fed and how much exercise that dog should receive. Obviously, the requirements for a Chihuahua are going to be a lot different than a German Shepherd. So, again, saying someone has hypothyroidism kind of gets us in the ballpark, but it doesn't really give us a specific idea of what we're dealing with. And although we know that there are changes in those lab values, as we said before, we don't know yet what is driving those changes. Now, one other quick note here that I want to point out is that in the medical world, for us to be diagnosed with a certain condition, we have to achieve certain thresholds or check certain boxes. And that makes sense. There should be standards or requirements for any sort of disease condition. So, as I mentioned, to be diagnosed with hypothyroidism, we have to have both low thyroid symptoms, but also that increase in TSH and low T4. Now, the thing that I wanted to point out is some people can have all of your classic hypothyroid symptoms. They're fatigued, exhausted, gaining weight, losing hair, they have brittle nails and dry skin, they're constipated, have brain fog, maybe dealing with anxiety and depression, and have changes in their sex hormone function. And if you and I were just sitting down and kind of casually talking through things, we would say, wow, we really have a number of those symptoms that really make sense for someone to have hypothyroidism. But if we don't check those clinical boxes, if we don't also have the increase in TSH and the low T4, then someone can't be diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And the reason why I wanted to make a point of this is because, number one, you might have been in a situation where you're struggling with many of these symptoms, but your doctor comes back around and says, nope, you don't have hypothyroidism because you don't have changes in TSH and T4. And while that may or may not be true, I do think we should look at more of an expanded panel when it comes to our thyroid function. Even though you don't meet those requirements, it doesn't mean that your symptoms aren't still very real. So that's number one. And number two is this whole concept of having low thyroid symptoms but not technically having hypothyroidism is something that we're going to come back to here in a little bit when we're talking about people who have Hashimoto's but they don't have hypothyroidism. So again, you can have symptoms present, you might be on the path to developing hypothyroidism, but if you haven't reached that particular threshold that allows people to say, yes, this is what this is, then you'll likely be dismissed in the meantime. I'm not saying that's right, but that's typically what happens. But if hypothyroidism is just this general category that puts you into this box that says you have low thyroid function, then we of course want to take that next step and say, why do we have these problems? And that's where Hashimoto's could be a part of your diagnosis. So just like saying you have a dog could mean a lot of things, saying you have hypothyroidism could mean a lot of things. You could have hypothyroidism because you had a medical procedure like radiation, either directly to your thyroid gland or to other structures in your neck. You could have hypothyroidism due to reactions to certain medications. It could also be from things like severe infections or nutrient deficiencies. But the most common cause of hypothyroidism in countries that have enough iodine in their food system is Hashimoto's. So what kind of pet do you have? I have a dog. What kind of health condition do you have? I have hypothyroidism. These are the categories that give us a general idea of what we're dealing with. Okay, But what do we do to take care of it? Well, the specific kind of dog that I have is a Chihuahua, or the specific kind of hypothyroidism I have is Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's tells us the specific cause or flavor or version of hypothyroidism that we're dealing with, and that can then direct us to the types of health choices that we need to make to help improve our symptoms. Now, again, this can get a little bit confusing because since Hashimoto's is one of the most common causes of hypothyroidism, those terms often get used together. And people either say hypothyroidism and the Hashimoto's part is just assumed, or they'll say, I have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. And again, because those terms are so often used together, it almost appears as though they're synonymous. But here are the situations, and I alluded to this a little bit already, where hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's can actually refer to different things. So you might have hypothyroidism, you have the increase in TSH, the low T4, and the hypothyroid symptoms. But when you ask your doctor why you're having these symptoms, they say, no, you don't have Hashimoto's. Instead, you have an iodine deficiency and your body can't make enough thyroid hormone because of it. So yes, you have hypothyroidism, but your particular breed or kind of hypothyroidism is iodine deficiency, not autoimmunity, not Hashimoto's. On the flip side, is it possible to have Hashimoto's but not have hypothyroidism? And the answer is yes. So remember just a little bit ago when I talked about how to be diagnosed with hypothyroidism, we have to meet certain medical thresholds? Well, when it comes to Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition for your thyroid that is defined by the presence of antibodies, either TPO antibodies, TG antibodies, or both, we need to keep in mind that in general, autoimmunity follows a pattern of progression over time, meaning that after the development of antibodies and that initial autoimmune activity, we can start to present with mild symptoms that will get worse as time goes on if the condition isn't being well managed. So in the early stages of Hashimoto's, we can have this antibody and autoimmune activity occurring. We can start to develop these classic low thyroid symptoms, but because we're in the early stages, there likely isn't enough damage to the gland for us to see those changes in those classical thyroid values. So even though the antibodies are present and the symptoms are present, our TSH and our T4 levels can still be normal. So even though we're not feeling right, technically speaking, we don't meet the diagnostic criteria to say, yes, this is officially hypothyroidism, and therefore you can't apply that diagnosis. So unmanaged, Hashimoto's can commonly lead to hypothyroidism, and those are the kinds of situations where you might have been told, well, things aren't bad enough yet, so we're just going to wait until things get worse and then we'll put you on medication. But in the early stages of Hashimoto's, even though symptoms are present, there isn't enough damage to officially say this is hypothyroidism, and therefore this is another point of difference between these two terms. It would be kind of like pointing out that the boiling point for water is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That's its diagnostic criteria or its diagnostic threshold. Leading up to that point, the water can still be really, really hot and it can still burn you. So leading up to the diagnosis of hypothyroidism, we can still have Hashimoto's and we can still have very severe symptoms. But until we get up to 212 degrees, no matter how hot the water is, we can't say that it's boiling yet. And that's the same way that things work when it comes to these types of thyroid diagnoses. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing that we can do is always ask why. If we're having thyroid symptoms, or we're even not sure whether those symptoms are thyroid related or not, we want to ask ourselves and we want to ask our practitioners, why are these things happening? Thyroid symptoms can be vague and general, and there can be a whole lot of reasons why someone might have something like fatigue. So if we can continue to drill things down and say, oh, my fatigue is being caused by hypothyroidism. Well, what's causing that hypothyroidism? Well, I also have positive thyroid antibodies, and therefore, my cause of hypothyroidism is due to Hashimoto's. The more specific we can get with these things, the more accurate and selective we can be when it comes to choosing different strategies. As we all know, When we're dealing with these types of thyroid symptoms and challenges, there can be a million different recommendations out there for what we should be doing next and what will help us to feel better. But the key to making the right choices and not becoming overwhelmed by doing too many things at one time all comes down to understanding what is causing our condition and supporting our physiology and our specific needs. So if you've heard hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's used together, used interchangeably, and used all different ways, I understand how that can be confusing, but hopefully today's video helped to explain things a little bit better and allows you to take better action moving forward. If you have any further questions, just leave them for me in the comments below, and I'll do my best to help you with them. If you like this video, found it helpful, and have been enjoying the content on the channel in general, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and click on the bell for notifications every Thursday to let you know that new videos are available. If you like the content but realize that you need more help, then I'd recommend sending an email to contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com with the word course in the subject line to get more information about my online course, Natural Hashimoto's Transformation. In my course, I help women with Hashimoto's who aren't getting help from their doctor, they want to make changes, but are overwhelmed by trying to do things on their own, go from feeling tired, exhausted, and discouraged to making nutritional, lifestyle, and supplement choices with confidence, helping them to understand their Hashimoto's better than they ever had before while feeling strong, energized, and being able to engage in their lives again. The course is 8 modules long and is specifically tailored to helping you get the best understanding you've ever had when it comes to Hashimoto's, while also providing a clear plan of action. That way you can start making real changes and start feeling better. In addition to the course material, you also get lifetime access to any updates to the course and weekly question and answer sessions where I can help support you every step of the way. So if that's something that sounds like it might be right for you, send me that email. We can hop on a Zoom call and make sure that things are a good fit. But that's all for this week's video. Thank you for all the love and support. And remember, even though Hashimoto's is extremely challenging, change and improvement is possible, even if you're not there yet. But my name is Dr. Bodle. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.